Now, talking about good coding practices, a very good practice when writing code is to document the code. Documenting code generally means using comments to explain what the code does. Now, code can often be complex, right? And if you're working on a project with a lot of other developers and you write some code and the code is a bit complex, other developers might not understand that. In fact, if you write some code and then you come back to that code after a few weeks or a few months, you yourself might not understand what you wrote. So in those cases, you might have to look at the code all over again in order to find out what exactly is going on, what the code does, and how it works. All of these problems can be solved if you just document the code, which means you explain what the code does along with the code itself. So whenever someone or you yourself look at the code later on, then you'll instantly understand what the code does and you won't have to spend time actually figuring out and going through all the bits and pieces of the code yourself. And this actually helps a lot when working on big projects with a lot of other developers. And in those cases, documenting code is actually a very good practice. So how do you document code? Usually in JavaScript, you can use comments to document the code. Now, comments in JavaScript code are not executed. They're treated as white space, and the browser actually ignores them when the JavaScript is executed. So you can put in almost anything inside the comment, and it won't affect other JavaScript code. Now in JavaScript, we have two types of comments, a single line comment and a multi-line comment. This is a single line comment. In order to write a single line comment, you first type two backslashes side by side. So when you type two backslashes side by side, you are starting a JavaScript single line comment. And anything you put after these two backslashes will be completely ignored for that specific line. So in this case, we put two backslashes side by side, and then we have some text that says this is a JS comment. And that is how you can create a comment in JavaScript. And you can put almost any text inside this comment. Most often, you'll be using these comments to document the code. So before you start one bit of the code, for example, you can write a quick comment that explains what the code does and how it works. So other developers and you yourself can figure out later on how that code actually works. Now we also have multi-line comments in JavaScript. Multi-line comments span more than one line. And you'll often use multi-line comments if you want to explain something big or write a comment that spans more than one line. And you can start a multi-line comment by putting in a backslash and then an asterisk symbol. So when you type in a backslash and an asterisk symbol, a multi-line comment starts. And that comment will continue on until you end the comment with another asterisk and a backslash. So anything in between these two backslashes and asterisk is regarded as a comment, and it will be completely ignored when the JavaScript is executed. And this is how you can create a multi-line comment to document your code in JavaScript. Now, comments are often used for another thing as well, and that is to mute out code for debugging purposes. So for example, if you have some JavaScript code and you put in a double backslash in front of that code, then that whole line is regarded as a comment, and any code you put in after that is not actually executed. So for example, here we have some JavaScript code that says console.log JavaScript is fun, which basically logs some text to the JavaScript console. However, if we put in a double backslash in front of that, then that line is regarded as a comment, and that code won't be executed. And oftentimes you'll be using this trick to mute out certain portions of your code for debugging and testing purposes. Now let's talk about using developer tools. Now in front-end development, browser developer tools are often used extensively, and they're really helpful. So let's take a look at what they are. Now most browsers these days come with a very helpful set of inspection and debugging tools, often called developer tools or dev tools. Web browsers such as Chrome and Firefox comes built in with these set of developer tools, and these tools are very useful when it comes to debugging and inspecting JavaScript code and also HTML and CSS. And these developer tools allow a developer to inspect code, including HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So using these developer tools, you can actually inspect the code in detail that you have loaded inside the browser. You can inspect HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and even other resources and assets. These tools are really helpful in finding errors and bugs, and they can even help you test out code before you write them. So for example, the JavaScript console can be used to find errors and bugs, and you can use that console to run some quick JavaScript code before you actually write them. And these tools make the development process a lot easier. The developer tools also allow you to monitor network usage, performance, and even security features. So as you can see, they're useful in a lot of ways. And using these developer tools can improve development productivity. Now oftentimes, if you don't use developer tools, it might take a long time to find an error, write the code, or test it out. And using developer tools can actually improve development productivity and make development a lot faster, easier, and simpler. Now oftentimes, if you encounter an error or if your JavaScript code contains an error, it will be logged to the JavaScript console in the developer tools. However, sometimes you might have some logical errors in your code. In those cases, you might need to debug your code in order to figure out exactly what is wrong. There are a lot of ways of doing that. Here are a few tips. Now, when something goes wrong and no error is actually logged to the console, you can log the different values that might be related to that error to the console in order to test those out. And you can do that using the console.log method. Now, the console object is part of the browser API, and it has a method called a log method, which can be used to log values and text to the JavaScript console. So here, for example, console.log, the string hello I'm JavaScript actually logs this string hello I'm JavaScript to the JavaScript console. And you can use this console.log method to log certain values to the console in order to test them out, and make sure that your application is working as expected. Most browsers also have the debugger tool, and this debugger tool can be used to pause the execution of JavaScript and to test your code out in a certain state. So if you want to pause your script in a certain place, in that place in your script you can put in the debugger keyword. You just type in debugger and then a semicolon. And when you load that script inside your web browser, whenever the browser encounters the debugger statement, it'll pause the execution of the script and it'll let you test all the values and code in that specific state, which is very helpful if you're working in big applications and you need to pause the execution in a certain place to test out all the values to make sure everything is working correctly. And that is how you can debug JavaScript code if you encounter some problems or errors.